Welcome to footballgameplan.com.
Where football makes sense.
Alongside Cornell Hunter, I'm Tyler Merkovich, and this is the 2009 team preview for the New Orleans Saints and Cornell. All we know, Sean Payton, offensive team, Drew Brees, great quarterback.
Well, when you start talking about the New Orleans Saints, the first thing you have to mention is the offense. Since Sean Payton's arrival in 2006, they've had the number 1 offense, number 3 offense, number 1 offense. And the whole system runs through Drew Brees. He makes everything happen on the field. He has phenomenal accuracy. He's very smart with the ball. He finds the open man. Last year, Drew Brees threw for 5,000 yards and didn't have 1,000-yard receiver. So that tells me that this guy is going to find the open man. He has no favorite target. Drew Brees is the engine that makes that Saints offense run.
Some of those favorite targets, Lance Moore, who he created a great rapport with last year. Marcus Colston, who was injured, who was a physical beast.
Yes.
Robert Meacham, who played well if he could stay healthy. And Jeremy Shockey, his first year. Talk about his weapons.
Well, Jeremy Shockey, he was riddled with injuries last year, suffered a pulled hernia, sports hernia mid-season. He still finished the season with 50 catches and almost 500 yards. You still have Devery Henderson as your deep man, like as you mentioned earlier with Robert Meacham. Lance Moore is a guy who's known for running excellent routes, and he catches every pass that hits his hands. So Drew Brees with that crop of receivers, and don't forget Reggie Bush out of the backfield. Here's a guy in the passing game that is relied upon heavily by Coach Sean Payton. So Drew Brees, with that slew of weapons, you can look for them to throw the ball around a lot, and it's very hard to find matchups where you can combat them one-on-one with all those weapons.
Speaking of Reggie Bush, his ally in the backfield, Deuce McAllister, for the last couple of years, he's out. Pierre Thomas, breakout year last year, started playing well at the end of the 2007 year, played pretty well last year. Is he going to carry the load?
Yes, look for Pierre Thomas to surprise a lot of folks this year. As you mentioned, Deuce McAllister is gone, so all that means is that's more carries that's going to be handed over to Pierre and Reggie Bush. And look for Reggie to have an increased role in this running game this season. Pierre is a guy who is consistent between the tackles. That's why Sean Payton loves him so much. He'll go in and get the tough yardage. But look for Reggie Bush to have continued success. Last season, he had a lot of big runs going up the middle, which goes unnoticed by a lot of fans. Reggie Bush and Pierre Thomas may turn out to be a hell of a ground game, but the key is both of them have been injured, so that is a concern. Reggie Bush has been injured the past 2 years, so has Pierre Thomas. People don't mention that, but Pierre Thomas has finished the season on the injury list the past 2 seasons. So I'm concerned with the health of the New Orleans Saints running backs, not the ability of the running backs. If they're healthy, they should produce. If not, they can struggle if they continue their history of injuries.
Health has been an issue, and if this guy stays upright, Jamal Brown, one of the best tackles in the league, what's in store for their offensive line?
You can go across the line. They have a young, dominant line. Jamal Brown is the left tackle. They just signed John Stinchcomb to a contract extension. They had a rookie, Carl Nix, who teamed with Jairi Evans at the guard position. So the Saints have a dominant offensive line, and Drew Brees is one of the least sacked quarterbacks in the league, and that says a lot because they're they pass more than anybody. So if you pass more than anybody and your quarterback is the least sacked in the league, that says a hell of a lot about the O-line down in New Orleans.
Defensive side of the ball, new defensive coordinator Greg Williams, former Redskins and Jaguars coach. He hopes that this defense will have relentless pressure like usually does. Charles Grant, Will Smith on the ends, defensive line.
Well, you know that Charles Grant and Will Smith have been suspended for the first 4 games, so you may see some lack of production, but they do have a serviceable backup in Bobby McCray. Last year, McCray had 6 sacks playing the backup role. They brought in Paul Spicer from Jacksonville, and as you mentioned, Greg Williams is known for bringing pressure with the defense, and look for those guys to send a multitude of blitzes, something that New Orleans has lacked the past 2-3 seasons under former defensive coordinator Gary Gibbs. He was let go. You bring in a pressure guy like Williams, who over the past 10 seasons has had 5 top 10 defenses. Look for a lot of pressure, a lot of sacks from Bobby McCray, especially Charles Grant, Will Smith when they get back. And you can't forget Cedric Ellis at the D tackle position. That guy had a big season last year. He missed a few games with injuries, but he finished with 4.5 sacks, a safety, few quarterback pressures, a lot of passive defense.
First round pick out of USC. Last year they brought in Jonathan Vilma at linebacker position. What's in store for their back seven? Because also they bring in Darren Sharper from the Vikings, and their first round draft pick is Malcolm Jenkins, who could play cornerback or safety. He'll probably play cornerback. They get back a guy, Tracy Porter, who had a great rookie year, Usama Young. Let's talk about their back seven.
Yeah, and the Saints defense is a totally revamped defense. All you can do is go based on history. Greg Williams is known for drafting well. That's the same guy drafted LaRon Landry, Sean Taylor, guys like Antoine Winfield. So he brings in Malcolm Jenkins, signs Darren Sharper. They get Jabari Greer over from the Buffalo Bills. Yeah, as you mentioned, they have Vilma in the middle. My biggest concern is the outside linebackers. They're still looking for an answer. Scott Fujita is a good wingman, but he's not a dominant player. So right now, the New Orleans Saints are still looking for the playmakers at the outside linebacker position.
Olindo Mare worked his way out. Garrett Hartley had a great end of the season for the Saints. He's now their new place kicker, which is an upgrade. And, of course, Reggie Bush, he could return it on any time. Any deficiencies in the special teams game?
Hey, the Saints may return with one of the best special teams units in the NFL. You have Reggie Bush, who's a phenomenal returner. The kick returner, Roby, had some big kicks last year in spare duty. And as you mentioned, Hartley was signed late in the season, didn't miss a field goal, 13 of 13. And keep in mind, the Saints lost 2 games last year by Grammatica missed field goals. So this team can have a complete turnaround if the Greg Williams signing brings the change that they seek on the defensive side of the ball.
One of the most talented teams in the NFL. Will they live up to expectations? A lot of teams have been picking this team, the NFC South, to win the division. What's in store for 09 for Sean Payton and Drew Brees?
Well, my thing is this. I just use common logic. You take the number one offense and you give them any sort of defense, and you should see a drastic change. You're looking at a team that finished 8-8 with a number one offense and a defense that ranked in the bottom half of the league, and they were riddled with injuries. The year before, 7-9, no defense. So you mean to tell me if Greg Williams comes in, provides a blitzing package, forces some turnovers, can you imagine what it would be like having a number one offense with a top 10 defense? I look for the Saints to finish first in that division.
Interesting. That's the NFC South champions predicted by Cornell. He's Cornell Hunter. I'm Tyler Merkovich. For more NFL team previews, visit footballgameplan.com/NFL.